right now, like literally as you listen to this, your circulatory system is springing a leak.
It is. Which, sounds alarming, but it's completely true.
Yeah, I mean, by the time you go to bed tonight, up to 3 liters of fluid will have just seeped out of your blood vessels and pooled inside your tissues.
Right. And if your body didn't have this hidden secondary plumbing network working around the clock to vacuum all that up, you would literally swell up like a water balloon.
It's crazy to think about. But welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring the lymphatic system.
It really is the ultimate unsung hero of human physiology. I mean, we were looking at a masterclass in drainage and defense here, and it operates right alongside our blood vessels, but it plays by a completely different set of biological rules.
Exactly. So our mission today is to sift through, well, centuries of anatomical history, old medical texts, and some truly wild recent research.
Oh, the recent research is fascinating.
Right. We want to understand a system most of us completely ignore until something goes wrong. So we're going to look past the old textbook descriptions of just, boring pipes and tubes.
Because it is so much more than that.
Yeah. Instead, we'll see how this hidden network acts as the staging ground for our entire immune system. We'll see how it serves as a VIP highway for the fat we eat, and, maybe most impressively, how it was the subject of a massive anatomical discovery in 2015.
A discovery that literally overturned 900 years of medical dogma.
Which is wild.
It is. But science is always a moving target, right? And this system is the perfect example of that. What the medical community thought they knew about human anatomy even 10 years ago has completely shifted because of what we are about to discuss.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand what the lymphatic system actually does, we have to start by looking at that fundamental flaw in our main circulatory system.
The leak.
Right, the leak. I used to picture the cardiovascular system like a high-pressure municipal water line, perfectly sealed.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
But a better analogy is probably a soaker hose buried in a garden. It is literally designed to leak.
That's a great way to think about it.
But if William Harvey famously proved all the way back in, 1628, that our blood circulates in a closed loop driven by the heart, I just don't get why we need a second system to clean up after it.
Well, that paradox confused early anatomists for a very long time, actually. Harvey's closed-circuit model was arguably the biggest paradigm shift in physiology up to that point.
It changed everything.
It did. It was brilliant, but it was just a little too tidy. To understand the need for a secondary system, we have to look at the physics of how blood actually behaves when it reaches our microscopic tissues.
Okay.
And that mechanism wasn't fully explained until the 1890s by a British physiologist named Ernest Starling.
Ah, right, the famous Starling forces.
Exactly. Those forces govern the whole tug-of-war of fluid across your capillary walls. So, picture blood arriving at the arterial end of a microscopic capillary.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
It's under significant hydrostatic pressure from the physical pumping of your heart. That pressure forcibly pushes fluid, mostly water, small solutes, and some dissolved nutrients out through the highly porous capillary walls.
Out into the surrounding tissue spaces.
Right. It's actively spraying out to deliver the goods to the cells.
Okay, but then what happens?
Well, as that blood continues moving along the capillary toward the venous end, the blood pressure drops off. Now, a different force takes over, which is osmotic pressure.
Osmotic pressure, okay.
See, there are large proteins trapped inside your blood vessels, particularly one called albumin. And these proteins act like a chemical sponge, pulling fluid from the tissues back into the blood vessel.
Oh, I see. But the sponge isn't perfect, is it?
Far from it. Let's look at the math here. Every single day, your body's capillaries filter out roughly 20 liters of fluid into your tissues.
20 liters, wow.
Yeah, but the venous ends of those capillaries only reabsorbed about 17 liters.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that leaves a 3-liter daily surplus of fluid, plus whatever proteins leaked out, just sitting in the tissue spaces.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to the soaker hose analogy. If the yard is flooding by 3 liters a day, you need a French drain to capture the excess water and route it away.
And that excess interstitial fluid is precisely what the lymphatic system is designed to manage. It's this secondary drainage network of highly porous, blind-ended capillaries.
Blind-ended.
Yeah, they just sort of start in the tissues. They weave through almost every tissue in your body, vacuuming up that extra fluid, which we now call lymph, and returning it to your bloodstream.
It's wild that humanity had absolutely no idea this daily fluid rescue mission was happening until a rather gruesome discovery in the 17th century.
Oh, the history here is fascinating
Yeah.
and definitely a bit gruesome. In 1622, an Italian anatomist named Gaspar Aselli was working at the University of Pavia, and he was dissecting a living dog, which was unfortunately a common vivisection practice of the era.
Ugh, a living dog. That's rough.
It is, but this particular dog happened to have been fed a very large fatty meal just before the procedure.
Okay.
So when Aselli opened the abdomen and looked at the mesentery, which is the thin membrane that suspends the intestines, he spotted these strange, white, milky vessels spreading all across it.
He initially thought they were nerves, didn't he?
He did, yeah. But nerves aren't hollow. And they certainly don't leak white fluid when you cut them.
Right, that would be concerning.
Very. So he eventually realized he was looking at an entirely new anatomical structure, one that Galenic medicine hadn't described in over 1,000 years. He published his findings in 1627, naming them vini lacti.
Or milky veins.
Exactly, milky veins.
And this basically kicks off a massive anatomical space race across Europe, right? Everyone is suddenly hunting for these hidden vessels.
Oh, it became a fierce international rivalry. By 1651, a French anatomist, Jean Piquet, discovered that these milky vessels in the gut actually converge into a large reservoir at the base of the spine.
The one we know today is the cisterna chyli.
Right. Then, around 1652 and 1653, you have Thomas Bartholin in Denmark and Olaus Rudbeck in Sweden independently mapping a body-wide network of these vessels.
And from what I read, they absolutely despised each other over who got the credit.
They really did. They disputed priority bitterly. Ultimately, it was Bartholin who coined the modern term lymphatic vessels. He named them after the Roman water nymph goddess Lympha.
It really highlights how anatomy back then was as much about poetry and prestige as it was about actual science.
Absolutely.
Well, I have a logistical question about the physics of all this.
Sure, go ahead.
We have this secondary system responsible for moving 3 liters of fluid from the tips of our toes all the way back up to our chest. But there is no lymphatic heart. There's no central pump at all. So how does this fluid actually fight gravity?
The lack of a pump is actually a brilliant piece of evolutionary engineering. The lymphatic system relies on a combination of passive structures and active biomechanics.
Okay, break that down for me.
First, the vessels are equipped with one-way valves, very similar to the ones we have in our veins.
So fluid is physically trapped from falling backward.
Correct. The spaces between those valves are called lymphangions. These little segments are wrapped in smooth muscle that contracts rhythmically, kind of like a tiny squeeze, to push the fluid up to the next valve.
Oh, that's clever.
But the real driving force is your own body's external movement. Every time your skeletal muscles contract when you walk or, even just shift in your chair, they squeeze the lymphatic vessels, physically milking the fluid upward.
So movement literally is medicine for this system.
Exactly. And beyond just walking, the deep physical act of breathing is a massive driver.
Wait, breathing? How does that work?
Well, when you inhale, your diaphragm drops down. This creates a literal pressure vacuum inside your chest cavity, which physically sucks the lymph fluid up from the lower half of your body toward your thorax.
That is incredible. A vacuum pump built into our breathing. But I want to circle back to Aselli's dog for a second.
Okay, the milky veins.
Yeah, because his discovery wasn't just about water drainage. The fact that the dog had just eaten a fatty meal highlights a bizarre quirk about how our bodies process food.
What's really fascinating here is that the lymphatic system pulls double duty. It's a critical piece of our digestive infrastructure.
Right, because normally if I eat a piece of bread or a chicken breast, the carbohydrates and the proteins are broken down into sugars and amino acids.
Yep.
And those go straight into my intestinal blood capillaries, and they head directly to the liver via the portal vein.
Exactly.
I've always pictured the liver as this strict border customs checkpoint. Every nutrient has to get inspected and processed before it is allowed into general circulation. But dietary fat somehow gets a VIP fast pass around the liver. Why?
It comes down to size and packaging, really. When your digestive tract breaks down dietary fat, the intestinal cells package it into these massive lipid bundles called chylomicrons.
Chylomicrons, okay.
And these structures are simply too physically large to fit through the tiny pores of standard blood capillaries in the gut. They need a larger door.
And the lymphatic system provides that door.
It does. Inside the villi of your intestines are specialized, highly porous lymphatic capillaries called lecteals.
Lecteals, got it.
The cells lining these lecteals overlap like tiny swinging doors. So when the pressure in the tissue builds up, these microscopic doors physically push open, allowing these massive fat bundles to just slip right inside.
Which perfectly explains the white fluid a Sally saw.
Yes, exactly. That fat-laden lymph is known as chyle. It travels from the gut up through that reservoir Jean Paquet found the cisterna chyli, and then routes straight up the body's main lymphatic trunk, which is called the thoracic duct.
And that duct handles most of the body, right?
It's massive. It drains about 3/4 of your entire body. Both legs, the abdomen, the left arm, and the left side of the head and chest.
So where does it finally dump all this fat and fluid back into the blood?
It merges directly into the venous bloodstream at the junction of the internal jugular and subclavian veins, right up near your left collarbone.
Oh, wow. So by routing it this way, dietary fat completely bypasses the liver on its first pass through the body.
Yes, it skips the customs checkpoint entirely. And just for anatomical completeness, the remaining quarter of the body, the right arm and right side of the head, are drained by a much smaller vessel called the right lymphatic duct.
And that dumps into the right subclavian vein, I assume?
Exactly.
Okay, so we have this massive plumbing network moving 3 liters of water and a bunch of dietary fat up to our collarbones every day.
Right.
But the fluid sweeping up from our tissues isn't just carrying water and fat, it's carrying cellular debris, bacteria, and viruses, which means this drainage system needs a world-class filtration network.
And this is where we transition from drainage into defense.
Right.
For a long time, old textbooks treated the lymphatic system and the immune system as completely separate subjects. But modern physiology sees them as basically inseparable.
Let's talk about those filters. Because when we come down with a cold, we always complain about our swollen lymph glands. And I always imagined these glands were squirting some kind of germ-killing chemical into the fluid.
That terminology is actually a major pet peeve for anatomists.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The term lymph gland is completely incorrect and mostly retired in modern medicine.
Well, my bad.
No, everyone says it. But true glands, like your sweat glands or your thyroid, actively secrete substances into ducts or the bloodstream. Lymph nodes do not secrete anything.
Okay, so they're nodes, not glands. How many do we have?
You have between 500 and 700 of these lymph nodes scattered throughout your body, mostly clustered in the neck, armpits, groin, and abdomen.
Well, if they aren't glands, and they aren't just passive filters like a Brita pitcher on your counter, what exactly are they doing?
Think of them as the war rooms where your adaptive immune response actually begins. Inside these nodes is an incredibly organized, highly active military architecture.
War rooms. I like that analogy.
Yeah. For example, we have dendritic cells. Think of them as the intelligence officers. They patrol the tissues, scoop up foreign material antigens, and physically carry them into the lymph node.
They're basically taking a piece of the enemy's uniform back to base.
Exactly. And once inside the node, they present those antigens to the T cells and B cells. These are the specialized soldiers of your immune system.
Right.
When these lymphocytes recognize a specific threat, they don't just sit there. They begin rapidly dividing, cloning themselves by the millions to mount a targeted attack.
Which explains the swelling.
Yes.
When your nodes swell during a throat infection, it isn't because they are clogged with debris. They are physically expanding because of explosive cell division.
It is a sign of a system working perfectly. Actually, we saw a very public example of this during the rollout of the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines.
Oh, really? What happened?
The vaccine triggered such a robust immune response in the arm where the shot was given that the local axillary lymph nodes, the ones in the armpit, swelled significantly.
Ugh. I remember reading news stories about women getting mammograms and panicking because of the swollen nodes on their scans.
Yes. It became such a widespread issue that professional medical societies had to issue official guidance on timing mammograms around vaccinations, purely to avoid triggering false cancer alarms from healthy, actively dividing lymph nodes.
That makes total sense. Now, to round out the geography of this defense network, the lymphatic vessels don't work in isolation, do they?
No, not at all. They collaborate closely with neighboring organs that share the same immune architecture.
Like the spleen.
Exactly. The spleen is fascinating because it uses a similar layout, but it filters the blood instead of the lymph. Then you have the thymus in the chest, which is basically the boot camp where T cells go to mature.
And mold. Right.
Yes, a molt mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. Things like our tonsils or the Peyer's patches in our intestines. They provide frontline security right where our internal bodies meet the outside world.
Okay, so all of these structures act as a unified anatomical stage for our immunity. So what does this all mean for a patient? If we understand this system's dual role in managing fluid and surveying for threats, how does this map of nodes change the way medicine is actually practiced when the plumbing fails or gets hijacked?
Well, it dictates almost everything about how we stage and treat cancer.
Right.
The global standard is the TNM staging system, and the N specifically stands for lymph node involvement. Knowing whether a cancer has spread from its primary tumor into the local lymphatic chain is often the biggest factor in a patient's prognosis.
And the way surgeons treat that spread has evolved drastically. I'm thinking specifically about the history of breast cancer surgeries.
Yeah, that is a dark but vital piece of medical history.
Huh.
In the 1880s and 90s, a prominent surgeon named William Halsted developed the radical mastectomy.
Okay.
Halsted operated under a flawed biological theory. He believed breast cancer spread outward like a ripple in a pond, in a very orderly, step-by-step fashion through the lymphatic chain.
So his solution was just maximum surgical aggression.
Right. Removing the breast tissue, the underlying chest muscle, and massive swaths of those axillary lymph nodes in the armpit.
But wait, by stripping out all that vital lymphatic plumbing, he basically destroyed the patient's ability to drain fluid from that arm.
Exactly. It resulted in severe, permanent arm swelling, a condition known as post-mastectomy lymphedema. It's essentially a man-made failure of the drainage system.
That's awful.
It was. For the better part of a century, an entire generation of women endured this disfiguring overtreatment. It wasn't until the 1970s and 80s that a researcher named Bernard Fisher led clinical trials, proving Halsted's mechanical model of cancer spread was biologically wrong.
Wow. So what did Fisher find?
Fisher showed that less invasive surgery combined with radiation produced equivalent survival rates, sparing women from that horrific structural damage.
Thank goodness. And that shift in thinking paved the way for an even more elegant solution in the 1990s, right? The sentinel node biopsy?
Yes, validated heavily by surgeon Armando Giuliano, it is a brilliant application of how lymphatic flow actually works.
How does it work?
Instead of blindly removing dozens of nodes, surgeons inject a radioactive tracer or a blue dye right near the tumor. Then they simply watch the lymphatic vessels carry that dye to the very first node in the drainage chain, the sentinel node.
The first guard at the gate.
Exactly. They biopsy that single node. If it is clear of cancer, the odds of the disease having spread further down the chain are incredibly low, so they can leave the rest of the nodes completely intact.
That is such an incredible leap in precision. But surgical removal isn't the only way this plumbing gets destroyed. We also have to talk about global health, because there's a parasite that specifically targets this entire network.
Yes, you're talking about lymphatic filariasis. It's caused by a microscopic parasitic worm called Wuchereria bancrofti, which is transmitted by mosquitoes.
Okay.
Once inside the human body, these worms migrate directly to the lymphatic vessels, lodge themselves inside, and physically block the flow of fluid.
So those 3 liters of daily leak fluid suddenly have nowhere to go.
Nowhere. Without a functional return route, that protein-rich interstitial fluid endlessly accumulates, usually in the tissues of the lower limbs. This chronic pooling triggers extreme tissue fibrosis and catastrophic disfiguring swelling, commonly known as elephantiasis.
That sounds absolutely devastating.
It is. Historically, the World Health Organization estimates well over 50 million people have been infected. It is a stark illustration of what happens when fluid balance fails. Eradicating this parasite remains a major global health target today.
Okay, if actual medical blockages like surgically removed nodes or parasitic worms are this physically devastating, I have to ask about social media.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, because I constantly see wellness influencers selling these lymphatic drainage detox massages to help average healthy people flush out toxins from their stagnant lymph. What is the deal there?
Well, if we connect this to the fundamental mechanics we discussed earlier, we can easily separate reality from pseudoscience. Manual lymphatic drainage massage is a highly legitimate, evidence-based physical therapy, but it is specifically for managing diagnosed lymphedema where vessels are physically missing or damaged by trauma or surgery.
So for a normal person,
The claim that an average healthy person has stagnant lymph that requires a spa professional to manually detox them has absolutely zero physiological basis.
because breathing and walking are already doing the job for free.
Exactly. Your diaphragm and your skeletal muscles are perfectly regulating your lymphatic flow every minute of the day. You don't need to pay someone to do it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yes.
We've mapped this intricate system from the leaky capillaries into the intestines up through the armpits and the neck. But until roughly a decade ago, the entire medical establishment was dead wrong about where this plumbing system actually stopped.
They were.
For 900 years, going all the way back to Galen, medical students were taught the brain was a completely separate fortress. It had the blood-brain barrier, it handled its own waste internally, and it definitively had zero lymphatic drainage.
It is honestly one of the most stunning examples of a supposedly settled anatomical fact being completely overturned in living memory.
Just completely wrong.
Completely.
Right.
In 2015, a team of researchers led by Antoine Louveau and Jonathan Kipnis at the University of Virginia published a paper in the journal Nature. They successfully discovered functional, active lymphatic vessels lining the meninges.
Meninges, those are the protective membranes that cover the brain, right?
Exactly.
Wait, how does modern science miss an entire network of vessels inside the human skull? For 9 centuries, that seems impossible.
I know, but they were essentially hiding in plain sight. It turns out that the standard tissue preparation techniques anatomists had used for centuries to mount brain membranes on slides, those techniques were physically destroying these specific, delicate vessels before anyone could ever look at them under a microscope.
That is mind-blowing. Our own tools were erasing the evidence.
Exactly. And the timing of this discovery is critical because it pairs perfectly with another major breakthrough from just 3 years prior in 2012.
Okay, what was that?
Researchers Jeffrey Aleph and Macon Neutergaard discovered what they dubbed the lymphatic system.
Lymphatic, with a G.
Yes, with a G. The G stands for glial cells. Glial cells are basically the support staff of the brain. The researchers discovered that during sleep, these glial cells literally shrink.
They shrink.
Yes. And this opens up the spaces between the brain cells, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to actively wash through the deep brain tissue. It acts as a massive pressurized waste clearance system.
So it's washing the brain. What kind of microscopic trash is this fluid washing away?
Lots of metabolic byproducts, but most notably a protein called amyloid beta.
Wait, amyloid beta, that is the exact protein whose buildup is implicated in Alzheimer's disease.
Yes, which raises a massive question for the future of neurology. You have the lymphatic system washing the amyloid beta out of the deep brain tissue, right?
Right.
And then you have these newly discovered meningeal lymphatic vessels draining that waste out of the skull entirely. Together, these two discoveries have cracked open an entirely new frontier in neurodegenerative disease research.
Wow. When you step back and look at the whole picture, the evolution of this system is breathtaking. We have a network with no central pump, relying purely on our own movement and breathing to balance a daily fluid leak from our blood.
Yeah.
It serves as the physical staging ground where our immune system learns to fight. It gives dietary fat a bizarre VIP pass around the liver. And now we realize it is literally washing our brain while we sleep, overturning nearly a millennium of settled science.
This is exactly why looking beyond the old textbook definitions is so crucial. The lymphatic system dictates everything from your baseline daily fluid balance and how efficiently you fight off a common cold to how an oncologist stages a cancer diagnosis.
It's connected to everything.
It really is. It sits at the absolute center of global health initiatives for tropical diseases. And today, it represents the cutting edge of how humanity might eventually understand and treat Alzheimer's disease.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought for you to ponder. We know that the traditional lymphatic system relies heavily on the physical, mechanical acts of breathing and muscle contraction to pump fluid against gravity.
Right.
And we now know from that 2012 research that the brain's lymphatic waste clearance system kicks into high gear specifically while we sleep to wash away Alzheimer's-linked proteins. So if both of these things are true, could the simple physical mechanics of how deeply we breathe and the way we position our bodies at night to maximize that drainage eventually become the next great frontier in preventing dementia?
That is precisely the kind of question this new frontier in anatomy demands we ask.
It's definitely something to think about before you go to sleep tonight. Until next time, keep asking questions.